So let's read these real quick. And this is a good thing to do, is open those regs up. You've got some time and you're getting paid. Don't go to your phone. You get breaks. Go to your phone on a break. Go do your whatever on your own time. All right? Let's read these. Protected ground. This is out of lowercase n, 1910.269. And we're going to talk about your TPGs, your temporary protected grounds. And here's a section out of it. Protecting grounding equipment shall be capable of conducting maximum fault current that could flow at the point of grounding for the time necessary to clear the fault. Does that make sense? Okay? Protected grounds shall have an impedance low enough so that they do not delay the operation of protective devices in case of accidental energizing of the lines or equipment. Okay? Or accidental could be unintentional. You know, someone throws in a switch at the switching room, and so these are good just to go over. These are really important because the employer is to be responsible for a lot of this as well, and to ensure the safety of their folks. The TPGs, I like to talk about that. That was Walter's first invention. He built the grounds tester 37 years ago, and since then, 37 years ago, he's got 17 patents. But what this grounds tester does is it puts continuous current on the TPGs, where other manufacturers, they'll use some current and their glorified ohms meter. So it's not a true test. The continuous current, Walter came up with this math up here, and what's interesting is the F855 ASTM, which are considered guidelines for the OSHA regs in lowercase n. They're considered guidelines. ASTM put my dad's math into page 2, table 1 in the guidelines. He came up with the math. I didn't know that until earlier this year. That's kind of cool. I thought ASTM did it. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about your TPGs. And then when we talk about your temporary protected grounds, we want to consider these a best friend. We're going to talk about 2 best friends today. And you want to always take care of your best friend, right? You do. And these are to be considered a best friend. And your best friend, what you want to do is prior to use, is you want to perform a visual inspection and a mechanical inspection every time prior to use. Now what's amazing is doing this for 7 years, coast to coast, Brownsville, Texas, into Canada, even a little international, that I've gone to utilities, contractors, quite a few, and before I got there, they were not training their linemen to visually inspect nor mechanically inspect their TPGs, their best friend. They weren't. They do now. A lot of things, tens of thousands of linemen are safer today than they were 7 years ago. And that right there, I got that. That's awesome to know. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at your cable. You do not want to see any smashed cable. You don't want to see any crimped copper or cable. You don't want to see any oxidization on your components, especially your contact points of your clamps. Make sure they're clean, make sure they're brushed. If you can't see your copper, you don't want to see any blackened copper or oxidized strands. If you have a clear jacket, you don't want to see any cracks on your clamps or obvious loose parts. Make sure everything visually looks good. Typically, if they look good, your TPGs are going to perform well for you, typically. All right. The mechanical inspection, you're going to grab a hold of that clamp, and you're going to make sure that clamp doesn't spin off the ferrule. Make sure when you grab a hold of the cable, that cable is nice and tight in the crimps of the ferrule. Make see any air when you're wobbling. It's just smashed, strong. That's what you want to look for. And obviously you're going to look for a lack of loose components. So you're going to perform the mechanical. I've gone to some utilities to where I have seen loose parts, blackened copper, broken strands. I've seen broken strands. And all these things, some of the TPGs that they took right off the line trucks because they were receiving new information, they never heard this stuff, is we put it on here And I would tell them that your TPGs, through the visual inspection, mechanical inspection, your TPGs, before we do an electrical test, which you also, the guidelines speak about, ASTM F855 and IEEE 1048. They both talk about it. They're good reads, really important reads. Hard to understand for me at first, okay? I grew up in the desert in Arizona chasing rattlesnakes and shooting bunnies. So, you know, I don't understand language very well, you know, raised by wolves kind of thing. So, you know, you get in front of these guys and they pull these off the truck and it's like, dang, they are a mess and they won't pass. And I tell them before we do an electrical test. But let's do an electrical test. Whenever you perform an electrical test, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you perform the electrical test with the cable in parallel. Right here. And what this does is it mitigates the magnetic field. So it mitigates it because the continuous current produces a magnetic field, and if you happen to have your TPGs coiled up, which we're going to show you, coiled up like this, hanging in the air, or maybe they're on your truck reel. You got some grounds on your truck reel, possibly, and you leave them coiled up like this, it creates a magnetic field. And this is your electrical reality. That current creates a magnetic field. And if it gets hit by a potential fault current, what happens is this cable will try to escape from itself. And if you're in the way, you're in proximity of that situation, and that cable tries, maybe the electrons start flowing through that conductor unexpectedly, unknowingly, accidentally, and you get this fault current for whatever reason, this thing will explode and run away from itself. And if you're in the way, you can get bopped. All right? Yeah, the TPGs, if it was on correctly, would save you and help protect you. But if you're in the way, they take you out. So you don't want to do that. So you want to go, when you're setting up your EPZ, your bonding and all that to be safe, you're going to make sure that your cable is going from point A to point B. Okay? Basically, straight. You can have some droopage, that's fine. You just don't want any coils. I did training in North Carolina last year, not too far from here, with a big contractor. And they were used to doing 115, 230, 69, a lot of transmission. And what they were doing is their assemblies for the higher lines, what they were doing when they got to the low lines is one of the linemen, at least, if not all of them, because he learned it from somewhere, is he said he would take his long cable and just coil it up and wrap it with electrical tape. So it looked all pretty cute hanging from that line. And he said, I can't do that no more. And I said, go to your boss and tell him that on those lower KVs that you need a different assembly. That's a little shorter. Just tell him that. And I said, I didn't say you can't do it. What did the class, what did the training show you? The instruction, what did it tell you to do? To do it or not to do it? What this is you got current running through here, and it's forming a magnetic field. Whenever current runs through anything, it forms that magnetic field, and there's a little magnet in here. Okay? So you see in here reality. This is your reality. Okay? Pretty robust there, isn't it? Okay? Now let's do this. Let's keep the same continuous current, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to mitigate that magnetic field best as possible. When you test, electrically test an assembly, you want to put like a 2x12, build a channel, 2x4s on each side, pre-measure it out so it's all measured. You don't have to have a measuring tape. All right. Now I'm going to bring that same magnet. Okay. It's a lot less, isn't it? More humming. Okay. So it's a lot safer. That's what you want. Okay. So, thank you, Brent. So just remember, when you're all out in the field, that you want to make sure that when you're working with each other, or you go home tonight, see your family, that you do not go to your family or work with each other all coiled up. Keep it smooth. Okay? That's the reality. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go down to 250. because a 1 amp cable requires 250 amps to test. So we're going to go down to 250. It's getting a little warm now with all that current running through. Go 250. Okay, a little, about 250. And what we see is a 0.02 voltage drop. Y'all see that?
Yep.
Okay, 0.20 voltage drop. You go up to your chart and it requires a 0.38 voltage drop or less. And it passes. So this assembly passes. Very well, actually. All right, it's pretty new, as you can see. Okay, so this assembly, what you do is you're going to date stamp it. And when you do your visual inspection, make sure that you guys look at that date stamp to make sure it's in compliance. We recommend about every 12 months. That's typical throughout the industry. Some go 24 months. I think that's way too long. Some go every 6 months. I think if you're training your line workers to visually and mechanically inspect your TPGs, 6 months is too often. Let them know, let them take some responsibility as far as watching over and looking after their best friend. 6 months is way too much, okay? The regs don't tell us how often. The regs don't, the guidelines, ASTM and IEEE do not say how often. I think that's wrong. I just think it's wrong. Because I know some companies today, some very large companies, that this very day, they still, believe it or not, do not test their TPGs electrically. That is, to me, insane. Because, see these words right here? How do you prove your TPGs are going to ensure safety for your line worker? Unless they're tested electrically. You kind of don't know, for sure. So you want a date stamp. Make sure that date stamp is in compliance. When you're out in the field, you could get inadvertently skipped. And make sure that your date stamp is in compliance with your protocol. Make sense? Okay, guys?